All right, welcome. Just going to do a little market breakdown going into this week. May do these regularly depending on the feedback from this one video, but let's go ahead and get started. We are looking at XAU USD commodity, and we're jumping from the monthly time frame. We'll be doing a multi-time frame analysis, monthly, weekly, and daily, looking for the best opportunities on each pair. But on the monthly, as you can see on the monthly, we are pushing to the downside, but we are coming into an area of extreme support. And if we do drop down to the weekly, we could see a rejection from that area. From the weekly, we would like to see a double bottom printed in this area. If it does want to reject, that would set up nicely. But before we could look for a move or a possible setup, we would need to see it break some structure to the upside on the daily first. Now going over silver. From the monthly time frame, it is pushing to the downside, quite aggressively rejecting previous structure support, now turned resistance. But if we do drop down to the weekly time frame, we can see that we've printed this weekly M formation that we would like to see completed at the neckline. So dropping down to the daily time frame, we could see a possible move back up into this area, which would be ideal for the strategies that we use. Going down to platinum from the monthly time frame, it is pushing down quite aggressively, but it is retesting previous structure support. That should now act as support once again, where we could see a rejection out of this area. Going down to the daily time frame, you can see that we have touched into this area, into this zone. We could see a rejection to the upside, but we would need to see some daily structure created before we can look for any of the strategies that we use over here at the FX Savant University. Let's go over US oil from the monthly time frame. It is setting up nicely. The most common pattern in the market is an impulse, a retracement, and another impulse creating a higher high or a higher low depending on the direction. And we are setting up nicely for a monthly TMCP, the most common pattern in the market, which is extremely powerful. Dropping down to the weekly, you can see that we are coming into this area. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we've printed a M formation on the daily, which could help further aid the analysis of seeing the push to the upside, because after a monthly formation, you would like to see the market come back and complete at the neckline, which could provide the bullish push that we need to see to not only complete at the neckline, but continue to the upside. Going down Euro USD, if we do look at it from the monthly time frame, very aggressively pushing to the downside, breaking structure of monthly structure, which is extremely important. If we do drop down to the weekly time frame, we can see that we've just impulsed to the downside after this impulse and this correction. Impulse, retracement, impulse, the most common pattern in the market. The finished continuation would be down in here. And if we do look at it from a daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to push to the downside, looking to complete and touch down in here for the target. But there's nothing really setting up. We do have structure right in this area that we would need to see broken to the upside before we can look for any pattern or any setup that we use. And if we do drop down to Gbp USD from the monthly time frame, we can see that we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively, retesting some of these lows down in here. From the weekly, we have just completed the impulse that we wanted to see from the most common pattern in the market. Impulse to the downside, some sort of exhaustion coming down, completing the impulse, meeting the next target. But on this weekly time frame, we have created an M formation. So even though we are down amongst the lows, pushing to the downside aggressively on the monthly time frame, we did come into an area of some support, where we would like to see the market make a move back to the upside, completing the M formation at the neckline. Could be a possibility to see the market move to the upside. And if we do drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are extremely overextended and in due for a correction. Going down to AUD USD, and I'm just chilling, man. If y'all have any pairs that I go over, whenever you do get in here, I may have already went over them. Just drop them in the chat, and I'll go over them once again at the end. But I will continue to go through the whole watch list first. So just kind of hang out and chill. If we are on AUD USD though, we can take a look from the monthly time frame. We've just broken below some support. We are continuing to push down to the downside. From the weekly, we've broken this structure area to the downside, came back for a retracement, retest the area perfectly, and we are now continuing to the downside. And if we do drop down to the daily time frame, if we do start to get some sort of retracement that we could use to take advantage of, we'd like to see the continuation to the downside for a daily TMCP. If we go over to USD Cad, on USD Cad, we have a market that has been pushing up to the upside. Not ideally, but it is making higher highs and higher lows on its way up. A little manipulation, creating higher highs and higher lows, and has thus made a extremely strong move to the upside, breaking above some structure on the monthly. So if we drop down to the weekly, we can see this in a little more detail, that this impulse to the upside has happened. And if we do drop down to the daily time frame, we do have a weekly W formation. I forgot to mention, excuse me, we do have a weekly W formation where the market has exploded to the upside, and on the weekly we would like to see it come back to the neckline, but it doesn't have to come all the way down, just at least to the 382 of the overall impulse to the upside. And if we do pull out the fibs, you know, I love the fibs, we can see the 382 is lining up right around this area. 50% is right at previous structure, so we could see a move to the downside, bouncing off one of those zones before continuation to the upside, which would set us up nicely. So if we look at it from a daily time frame, we can see we've broken above some structure, and we have now started the retracement. It would be ideal to see a retracement or a correction, exhaustion, some sort of pullback down into this area before we see the continuation to the upside. Going down to NZD USD. From the monthly time frame, pushing to the downside quite aggressively, rejecting previous structure support, now turned resistance. If we do look at it from the weekly time frame, we do have a weekly M formation. So we had to move up, move down, move up, move down. We would like to see the market come back to the neckline and complete there, whether it wants to continue to the downside or continue to the upside. It's none of our business, but we just know where the market would like to complete. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, before we can start to look for a move to the upside, we do have some daily structure in this area that we would need to see broken before we start to look to the move to the upside. If we do go over to USD CHF, on USD Swiss franc, we have a market that's completing a monthly TMCP, so we have the impulse breaking structure to the upside, coming back for the retracement and looking to continue to the upside, making a higher high, and that is on the monthly time frame. So it is extremely strong. But if we do look at it from a weekly time frame, we can see that we have a weekly W formation on it that we would like to see the market come back for some sort of retracement and then continue to the upside. It is quite overextended with some perfect areas for us to come down to for a retracement. If we do get that on the daily time frame with some sort of retracement back down into this area, it would be ideal to see the movement to the upside for a continuation for a higher high of the monthly TMCP. So the completion of a monthly retracement. Going down to USD Jpy, what can we identify on USD Jpy is that on the monthly, we're extremely bullish. On the weekly, same thing, where we've created this W formation. We would like to see the market come back after a W formation to the neckline and complete the pattern. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we are overextended to the upside on the daily, and a correction is due. After the correction, we could see the continuation to the upside, which would set us up very nicely. Going down to GBP NZD from the monthly time frame, what can we see from the monthly time frame is that we've had this nice impulse retracement and impulse once again, the most common pattern in the market. We would like to see the continuation complete at the -27 of the retracement, and that is on the monthly time frame. So we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively on GBP NZD. If we look at it from a weekly time frame, we've just came into previous structure support that should act as support once again, but we do have a minor impulse retracement and looks of another impulse on the weekly here. So we could see more continuation to the downside, and on the daily, we are right around that zone that if we do get a break below this area, we can look for the retracement back into this area for a continuation to the downside for a daily TMCP to the downside. Gbp CHF from the monthly time frame pushing down quite aggressively right here amongst the lows down here in this area. On the weekly, still pushing to the downside quite aggressively, quite overextended as well, and we've just came into this area. Previous structure support acted as support. We are starting to break below it. It could be very interesting if we see the market break down below and then immediately come back into this area where it could possibly provide a inverted head and shoulders on this. But if the market does start to break down very clearly, breaking down, impulsing to the downside, then a retracement back into this area for TMCP1 to the downside could be possible. Going over Euro NZD. On Euro NZD, we do have this possibility of an inverted head and shoulders that is starting to be created right here. We have the left shoulder, the head, and then we have an immediate break back into this area, coming back, retesting the left shoulder, not breaking below it, where we could see the explosion to the upside coming from this area. And that is on the monthly. On the weekly, we have the market that is starting to make moves to the upside. We've broke above previous structure support right in this area, and we are currently above it. Going down to the daily time frame, this one is setting up pretty nice. Starting the retracement, we have a clear impulse to the upside, and starting the retracement where I would like to see this market make a move to the upside, moving away from this area down in here. CHF JPY. Swiss yen from the monthly time frame, we are making moves to the upside. From the weekly, we are rejecting previous structure resistance right in this area, but we are also above previous structure support. Currently on the daily time frame, we do have this weird head and shoulders in here, but we could see a possible break to the upside, and if we do get an impulse to the upside, a retracement back into this area for a continuation would be the setup that I would be looking for. Going down to Euro GBP, and on Euro GBP we are pushing to the upside. We had an impulse, not ideal retracement, but we had the retracement in one candle down here, and then we had an explosion to the upside. So we are looking to continue and complete the most common pattern in the market. We're currently at the highs on the weekly, looking to be right in here where we have created this structure area that we broke out of on the weekly. It could be possible that we see a retracement back down into this area before we see the explosion to the upside. But if we do drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we are amongst the highs, where a retracement back in this area before an explosion to the upside would be what I would be waiting for. Now I'm going down to the monthly on Aud Cad. It is setting up quite nicely for a monthly TMCP to the downside. We have the impulse here, the retracement, and then we are starting the impulse to the downside, and that is on the monthly. On the weekly, we are at previous structure support that is acting as support once again. So we really need to see a break below this structure area before we start to look for a move to the downside. But if we do drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are rejecting previous structure support, now turn resistance in this area with this candle to the downside, where we could see impulse to the downside. And if we do get that impulse, we could then look for a TMCP to the downside after the retracement. Jumping down to Aud CHF from the monthly time frame. If we do look at it from the monthly time frame, we did make this move up, and then we exploded to the downside, or crashed to the downside. But within this move, we did create an M formation on the monthly, and we are kind of close to the neckline, but we haven't completed it yet, where we could see a completion of the neckline. If we do drop down to the weekly time frame, you can see that we are kind of consolidating in this area, not really breaking out too much in either direction, but we did create the candle that we want to see the next one fill in the wick, and that is on the weekly. But on the daily, if we do hop over here, we are below some daily structure that we would need to see broken to the upside before we start to look for possible moves to the upside if the market wants to come back and complete the monthly in formation. Dropping down to Gbp Jpy on the monthly, we've recently been rejecting these highs, looking to make a move to the downside. So we have a move to the upside, coming back for the retracement, a failed impulse, not creating a higher high, but then starting to make moves to the downside and currently breaking below that level. On the weekly, we have just been making moves to the downside just every week, closing more bearish than we have the week before. And if we do drop down to the daily time frame, if the market was going to make a move to the upside, we would still need to see it break above all this daily structure first before we look for any possible moves to the upside. But right now, currently, as the market is moving to the downside going into this week, if it does continue to break down, looking for a retracement would be where I look for the next impulse right around this area. AUD NZD from the monthly time frame. We've made moves to the upside, quite overextended on the monthly, but we are pushing to the upside. On the weekly, we just had the retracement, retracing back down to previous structure resistance that should now act as support. On the daily time frame, we have a nice and easy impulse to the upside, nice and easy retracement, and then we are looking to start the next impulse. So this one is setting up pretty nicely for a TMCP1 going into this week. If we do look at Cad Jpy from the monthly, we are pushing very aggressively to the upside. On the weekly, same thing, very aggressively pushing to the upside, retesting previous structure resistance. And if we do look at it from a daily time frame, we just completed the TMCP1, so we had the impulse to the upside, come back for the retracement, and then we had the impulse to the upside, creating a higher high once again, hitting the minus 27 of the overall retracement of the daily. And then if we do possibly get another impulse to the upside out of this area, and we do get the perfect retracement that we are looking for, we can look for a possible continuation to the upside on Cad Jpy. If we look at Eurocad from the monthly time frame, we just came into this area of support, which would now be support. We came down and started going in the opposite direction after we left this area. So once it is support, if it does get retested, it should act as support once again, where we could have this weird left shoulder head all in here, explode it back into the area, come back, retest the left shoulder, not breaking below it, and that is from the weekly time frame. So an inverted head and shoulders, which is further continuation to the upside, and it is a bit risky, but if we do look at it, if we do get a retracement back down in this area, this would be the completion of a daily W formation, which sets it up nicely for a continuation to the upside after an impulse, a retracement. We are looking for the next impulse, so that could be possible going into this week on Usdchf. If we drop down to Euro Jpy from the monthly time frame, on the monthly we have a monthly TMCP, which is very, very strong. We have the impulse to the upside, breaking structure, coming back for the retracement. It could possibly go ahead and create a higher high on the monthly. Dropping down to the weekly, you can see that we've came down after we changed market structure, so exploded to the upside, impulsing, came back for the retracement, creating lower lows and lower highs. Then we finally consolidated, which is a shift in momentum, exploded out of this area, which is setting us up nicely for this left shoulder head area down in here with the explosion back to the upside. And then we could see the retracement back in here, retesting the left shoulder, not breaking below it, which will then set us up perfectly for a move to the upside, and that is Euro Jpy, which could possibly happen this week. If we do drop down to Eurocad, Eurocad is very interesting as well. We've came down into this area of support, and it looks like we want to start some sort of move to the upside. If we do drop down to the weekly, we have this candle here that we know the next one wants to fill in the wick, which is a further continuation in the aid to the move to the upside. And as it stands right now, we have all these wicks right in here. We have the break below this area close. And if we do get the push back into this area, we could see a possible retest of the left shoulder, not breaking below it. And if we do drop down to the daily time frame, we could see an explosion to the upside for a higher high to be created. So very interesting on Eurocad for this week. We also have Aud Jpy on the monthly time frame. From the monthly time frame, we are very bullish, pushing up to the upside. On the weekly time frame, you can see that we're making moves to the upside as well, retesting these previous highs up in here. And then on the daily time frame, we are starting to complete the TMCP from this daily time frame, where if we do continue to complete this impulse to the upside and a retracement after we break amongst these highs, would be ideal for us to look for a continuation to the upside. Cad Chf from the monthly time frame. On the monthly, we've just made this impulse to the upside, came back for a retracement, and looks like we are starting another impulse to the upside. But if we drop down to the weekly, you can see that we are currently below some structure. So this area right in here is some structure. And if we do manage to break to the upside on the daily time frame out of this structure, further giving us a little impulse, a little more impulse. If we get a retracement, a continuation to the upside would be a bit risky, but it could be possible. Euro AUD from the monthly time frame. We've came down in this area and have created some support. So this is an area of support. Even though we did make a retracement and moved back to the downside, we only retested previous structure support. That should now be support until it is broken through. If we do drop down to the weekly time frame, you can see that we've had a little bit of consolidation in this area, which is a sign of change of momentum, where if we do get the push to the upside, we could have a makeshift left shoulder head accumulation and then a move to the upside, coming back, retesting the previous structure that was created in this area for a possible rejection to the upside. If we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we've impulsed to the upside, came back for this retracement. Right in this area would be ideal for the retracement to end, to look for the continuation to the upside. Gbp Aud and Gbp Aud, we are pushing to the downside very aggressively, so we are completing the impulse. If we look at it from a weekly time frame, we can see that we started this impulse to the downside, breaking below some structure, so very, very bearish. And if we do look at it from a daily time frame, you can see that we are pushing to the downside with this one candle. And then if we continue to break down lower, looking for a retracement and continuation would be ideal. Now, if we go over to Gbp Cad, on Gbp Cad, we are very, very overextended on Gbp Cad, breaking to the downside, but that means we are extremely bearish. And if we look at it from the weekly, we have created this weekly impulse to the downside, so a retracement is due. But on the daily, we are still continuing to push. When this impulse is completed, a retracement back in this area and continuation to the downside will be what I'm looking for. Now, if we go to Nzdchf from the monthly time frame, we've created this impulse to the downside, started this retracement. If we do look at it from the monthly, we are below some weekly structure. If we look at it from the weekly, we are below some weekly structure. So not yet ready for a move to the upside to be looking for, not high probability yet. But if we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that if we get a impulse above this area where we've had a kind of stayed above it, we stayed above it. When we stay below it, we stay below it. Line right in here. So if we get a break above, impulse above, coming back for a retracement right around that area would be ideal to look for a continuation to the upside on NZD Swiss franc. Now going down to NZD Cad. On Cad on the monthly time frame, we've had the impulse to the downside, the retracement. It looks like it's starting another impulse to the downside, but we do have some structure support in this area. Until it's broken, it is structure support once again. So you can see that we've had this weekly M formation and broke down below it, and it has completed at the neckline. And if we do drop down to the daily, if we were going to make a move back up before continuing to the upside, we would need to see some daily structure broken. So we would need to see an impulse out of this area first. And after the retracement, we would look for a continuation to the upside. Going down to Nzdchf from the monthly, pushing to the upside quite aggressively. From the weekly, we had the impulse to the upside, look for a retracement, and then the impulse started on the weekly. And on the daily, you can see that we are pushing to the upside, completing this impulse retracement, impulse move, impulse retracement, impulse creating a higher high right there. And if we do get a continuation to the upside and a further impulse after a retracement, it would be ideal to look for the continuation to the upside on Nzdchf. Going over to Aud Usd, on Aud Usd, we do have a market that is right at the monthly lows. So we are at previous structure support that could possibly act as support once again. And if we are looking at it from a weekly time frame, we have started to make moves to the downside on the weekly, pushing quite aggressively. But if we do look at it from the daily, you can see that we came into the daily support area as well. And we are finding some trouble breaking down below it. But if we get a clean break below, looking for the retracement, we can look for the continuation to the downside. But if we start to make some moves to the upside, we do have some structure that we would like to see the market break above first before we look for a continuation. So nothing really on Aud Usd. If we do look at USD PLN from the monthly time frame, pushing to the upside very, very aggressively, starting to become overextended. But we are up at the highs, and since we are at the highs and created this sort of impulse retracement, retesting previous structure support or previous structure resistance, now turn support on the daily time frame, we would need to see that broken, this area broken to the upside before we start to look for a retest and continuation. So we had previous structure resistance in this area, came back down, didn't test it perfectly, but previous structure resistance, now turn support. We want to see the continuation to the upside. Same thing once again, previous structure resistance. We want to see it broken to the upside, turned as support before we start to look for the continuation. On USD Thai bet, on the monthly time frame, very, very aggressively pushing to the upside, very bullish. On the weekly, pushing to the upside as well. So after this impulse, we have the retracement, the most common pattern in the market. We want to see a higher high be created. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, we've just came in this area, but what if we do get a perfect retracement back down in here, we can then, look for a continuation to the upside. Euro PLN. So if we go down to Euro PLN, Euro PLN is pushing to the upside on the monthly. It looks like we're starting some retracement, previous structure resistance, now turn support. If we look at it from a weekly time frame, you can see that we did break above this area, came back down, retested it, and we are starting to push to the upside once again. And if we look closely, if you start to train your eyes, what you can start to identify here is if we add the patterns together, just look at the moves in the market. From here, we came down, we found some support, came up, came down, came back up, but we ended here, but we continued to push down. So we found some structure support right in this area. After we broke down below it, we immediately came back into the zone, and then we are starting to retest all this structure support over in here. So we have a weekly inverted head and shoulders, where this is the left shoulder, the head, this is the right shoulder. After we get a completion of the retracement in here, we could see the explosion to the upside. Dropping down to the daily time frame, you can see exactly what I was speaking about in a little more detail. Let me clean this up a little bit. We do have some structure area right in here that we would need to see broken to the upside first before we see the market explode from this left shoulder, head, right shoulder area to the upside. So going down to Euro SEK from the monthly time frame, we have a market that is pushing to the upside quite aggressively. So we've had a few candles showing a strength in the market. 2 candles up, 1 candle down showed the bearish strength, but an immediately bullish candle covering the same ground shows bullish strength. And then the next candle, the next monthly candle, is starting to make moves to the upside as well. If we look at it from the weekly, we can see the impulse to the downside and the impulse back up as well. Going down to the daily time frame, you can see that we've just completed this impulse correction and impulse move, and we are starting to make another impulse and retracement now. If we do get a retracement back down in this area, a continuation to the upside will be what I'm looking for. USD SEK from the monthly time frame pushing to the upside quite aggressively. From the weekly, just completed this impulse retracement and impulse pattern, the most common pattern in the market on all time frames, over and over and over. If we do drop down to the daily, even though we had a push to the upside, this retracement, we can't look for the retracement, or we can't look for the continuation after one retracement candle. So we would need to see the market explode to the upside, creating some impulse, and then come back for the retracement before we look for the continuation. Euro SGD from the monthly time frame pushing to the downside quite aggressively. We have some support. This monthly candle is still open, so it can still fluctuate. It is not a closed monthly candle, but if we look at it from the weekly time frame, we can see that we've had this move to the downside, started this rejection, or we started this retracement, and we got rejected from previous structure support, now turned resistance. If we look at it from the daily time frame, we can see this is the area I'm speaking about, and once again rejected from the daily time frame, pushing to the downside. If we were going to look for a move to the upside, so if this overextended move on the monthly wanted to correct itself, we would first need to see it break above some structure on the daily. And let's go over USD SGD pushing to the upside quite aggressively. On the weekly, pushing to the upside very aggressively, retesting previous highs. And on the daily, we would need to see the market break above structure, creating an impulse, coming back for a retracement before we see the continuation, or before we look for the continuation to the upside. Going down to Eurozar, if we do look at Eurozar from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively, breaking structure and creating structure. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that we've created this W formation. We want to see a completion at the neckline. If we do get that completion at the neckline, if we look at it from the daily time frame, it could set up for a possibility to make a move to the upside. But with these candles printed the way that they are right now, it invalidates our strategy. So we cannot be looking for this move, even though it will possibly present itself coming this week. If we go down to Gbp Dk from the monthly time frame, we are starting to push to the downside. So we've had an impulse and a retracement, and looking to start the next impulse to the downside right here. So further continuation to the downside is possible. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we do have this weird area right in here, supply demand area, that could possibly get retested before we see the continuation to the downside. If we drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to find some structure support right in this area, which is previous structure. If we do make a retracement, we could possibly look for a continuation to the downside, but we do have this overextended M formation as well that could possibly complete at the neckline before the continuation to the downside provides itself. Dropping down to Gbp NOK, if we do look at Gbp NOK from the monthly time frame, we're trapped in this horizontal accumulation zone right in here, so we're just moving sideways, but we did just retest structure support, so a move to the upside could be possible for some sort of retracement. As you see, this impulse, we are starting the retracement on the weekly, retesting previous structure support that should act as support once again. If we drop down to the daily time frame, we did just make a move to the upside, breaking structure, coming back for a retracement. It is a little bit risky, but on GBP NOK, we can look for TMCP1 to the upside. SGD JPY from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively, breaking structure. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we just made this overextended W formation from the weekly. We want to see a completion back down here or some sort of retracement for a continuation to the upside. If we look at it from a daily time frame perspective, we just created this impulse to the upside. If we do get some sort of retracement back in this area, we then can look for the continuation to the upside. If we're looking at USD ZAR from the monthly time frame, we're pushing to the upside quite aggressively. From the weekly, we've just broken above some structure. On the daily, we do have this W formation. We do have this W formation in here where we would like to see a completion back down at the neckline before we see a continuation to the upside. Going down to GBP SEK from the monthly time frame. GBP SEK, we have this impulse to the upside coming back for the retracement, and we have some sideways accumulation showing a shift in momentum. So we could see a possible move to the upside. If we look at it from the weekly, we've just came around this structure area here after this impulse to the downside. We have an impulse to the upside, retesting previous structure resistance that's now acting as resistance. And we could see a possible break above that area going into this week. But we would need to see a price break above this structure area, previous structure resistance that is now acting as resistance once again, before we look for the continuation. GBP SGD from the monthly time frame, we have the market that is pushing down quite aggressively, breaking below monthly structure. If we do look at the weekly time frame, we have a market that's just impulse to the downside, so a correction is due. We are quite overextended and the candles are starting to get fairly smaller. They're not making large moves in one daily candle as often as they used to. So we could see a possible exhaustion coming where a correction would set us up perfectly for a TMCP1 to the downside. NOK SEK. If we look at NOK SEK from the monthly time frame, we have the market that has just started an impulse to the upside. We've retraced back down, giving a nice retracement at previous structure resistance, now turned support, and we're looking to continue to the upside for a higher high, completing the most common pattern in the market. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we've came into this area where we would have some left shoulder, some head, some right shoulder right in this area that could help aid the continuation to the upside. If we look at it from the daily time frame, yes, we have the impulse to the upside, we have the retracement, and we have the start of what we would like to see as the impulse. But before we start to look for any possible setups, we need to see the market breaking and creating structure first on the daily time frame, and that is NOK SEK. On NOK JPY, on the monthly time frame, we have the market that has just made a move to the upside. So we have an impulse, the retracement, we have the start of the next impulse where we'd like to see a higher high created, completing the most common pattern in the market. If we do look at the weekly time frame, we have just broken above some structure, come back for the retracement. We would like to see the possible move to the upside right around here, because we do have a daily M formation that was created. So that could help further aid in the push to the upside and continuation for a higher high to be created. If we go back down to USD NOK from the monthly time frame, we are breaking above some structure, so aggressively bullish, and we are starting to break above some structure on the weekly where we do have this weekly W formation. We have the move to the downside, move back up, move back down, explode to the upside. We would like to see it complete at the neckline before we see a continuation to the upside. We are very, very overextended. Not very overextended, but we are overextended to the upside, where if we get a good and nice retracement back down in this area, we can look for a continuation to the upside on USD NOK. Going down to Euro NOK on the monthly time frame, we have price that is came in this area, broke down, immediately broke back into the area, came back and retested the left shoulder, but did not break below it, so we could see a possible move to the upside. On the weekly, we are starting to show some weekly bullishness with this extremely large weekly candle. If we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we have a daily impulse right here, where if we start to get the rest of the retracement, once the retracement ends, we can then look for the continuation to the upside. USD CNH from the monthly time frame, very overextended, quite bullish, extremely bullish. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, very overextended as well on the weekly. If we look at it from the daily time frame, quite overextended as well. Had some sort of retracement. Not ideal for us to look for a move to the upside now that it's approaching the previous highs. But if it does make another impulse to the upside after the retracement, a continuation move on TMCP to the upside could be possible. USD ZEC Corona from the monthly time frame, extremely bullish on the weekly, pushing to the upside as well. Previous structure resistance, looking to break above that on the daily time frame. It is quite risky to look for this move to the upside as it is right now, because this is the structure support that we would need to see broken from a daily time frame before we see the move to the upside. But by then it will probably be too close to the highs. But we do have a TMCP move to the upside, impulse retracement, looking to complete for a higher high, most common pattern in the market. If we go down to USD DKK, USD DKK is pushing to the upside quite aggressively as well on the weekly. Just completed this impulse retracement and impulse pattern, the most common pattern in the market. And if we do drop down to the daily, we are starting to make moves to the upside. If we get an impulse to the upside breaking above this structure here, we then can look for a continuation after the retracement. USD Huff from the monthly time frame, very bullish. From the weekly, just completed another impulse to the upside as well. On the daily, we just created this M formation where we could see the possible completion, but as it is right now, we are too close, so it's not really enough room to capitalize on this move from here to there. So we are going to probably complete this M pattern, very high completion rate, but there could be a possible move to the upside as well. And then if we drop down to USD Mexican Peso, on USD Mexican Peso, we are kind of trapped in this area on the monthly, kind of consolidating sideways, so nothing really ideal. On the weekly, we just had this impulse to the downside and this retracement. We are looking to start the next impulse to the downside as well. But if we do drop down to the daily time frame, we've came down into this area of consolidation, the support area where we're just bouncing back and forth. So since we just came into there, we could see a possible move back up to complete this M formation, and it could put us in a good situation to see the continuation to the downside and complete the weekly TMCP. But as it is right now, nothing ideal. I wouldn't be looking for anything on USD Mexican Peso. And to wrap it up, so the last one we'll go through is Bitcoin, so BTC USD. We have the monthly time frame. We just came back down and retested previous structure resistance that should now act as support. So it won't be until 2024 when the next halving event comes, and that should give us the momentum we need to see the explosion to the upside for all-time highs once again. So until then, I don't really expect much out of Bitcoin. But if we look at it from the weekly time frame, we've created a weekly M formation where a possible move back up to the neckline for a completion could be possible. But even then, it doesn't mean that we're going to explode to the upside. It simply just puts us up in another bearish pattern, which would be left shoulder, head, right shoulder. So more continuation to the downside would be to come. But if we do look at it from a daily time frame, we can see that we do have some structure that we need to see broken first before we start to look for a weekly M formation to be completed. So any type of move to the upside, we need to see this structure level broken first, and that is on Bitcoin USD. And that's going to be pretty much it, man. We're going to wrap it up there. So I don't mind to do these breakdowns and watch list updates multiple times a week. If you are enjoying it and if you made it this far to the end of the stream, I would appreciate it if you drop me a thumbs up. A subscription would also be nice. Go ahead and click that button. It's free. But yeah, man, that's what I'm looking forward to this week throughout all the pairs that I'm looking through. Multiple strategies on all of them as well. So I only went through monthly, weekly, and daily for the direction. But within that, you can possibly find some good setups on lower time frames. So that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll holler at y'all when I holler at y'all, man. Until next time.